Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fulfilling Work, Meaningful Life. I am your host, Anthony Craiker, and I am joined today by Adam Haston, entrepreneur and author of The Wonder Effect, an adventurous guide for igniting your passions and pursuing your calling. Adam, thanks so much for joining us today.
So happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, Adam, what's the most meaningful experience you've had in the last week?
So the way that I think about it is that meaning can take on lots of different understandings. There was a interesting thing that happened this week for me where we had our simple things in life, when you're missing them, become outsized and critically important. So we came back actually from where you live in Orlando, and we had been up there for about a week and a half. We came back home and our washing machine was not working. Now I have 7 kids, and so washing your clothes is like critically important. And so we had ordered a washing machine from Home Depot. And one of the things that I don't like to do is have to do, even though I feel like I can overcome stuff, there's certain things that I don't want to do if I don't have to do them. And one of them would be connecting the washing machine and undoing the thing and getting rid of the current one that we have. So, it's like we have it in a small room, so it's stacked on top of each other. So the dryer's on top, the washer's on the bottom, and washing machines are really heavy. So it's worth every penny to pay for the people to connect or reconnect your equipment and to dispose of the old one.
Sure.
So I made what I would call the more sorry, let me back this up. So therefore, when I ordered it, I feel 99% certain that I checked those boxes because that's what I would do. And now juxtapose that, we had a delivery coming in and my daughter was returning to school in Israel. And I wanted to take her with my wife to the airport because that would be the meaningful thing to do over installing a washer and dryer. So on one level, the most meaningful thing was taking my daughter to the airport. However, what happened was I woke up my son who was going to be home and I said, they're delivering our washing machine. I need you to make sure that when they come, that they come and they connect it. Call me when they get there. Sure enough, we have a great experience taking our daughter to the airport, and I get a notification that the washing machine was delivered. So I immediately call my son, and he says that they just he didn't even see it. It was signed by someone. They dropped it off, and it's in my house.
Oh, no.
So we had to go. So now I have a washing machine, which theoretically solves my problem, but they didn't connect it. And so what that ended up requiring was a whole host of things, because we needed to get a furniture dolly from somebody to be able to move the ones. I had to have my son help. So I was enabled to have this really fun experience, which I say somewhat tongue in cheek, of having to go through all this. But it showed that, my son and I, we had time to spend to overcome this obstacle of not having our wash, desperately needing it. So the most meaningful thing was also extremely painful because it was very difficult to do. But ultimately, we were able to wash our clothes, which is super meaningful and important. So I say it as somewhat from a serious standpoint, and also from somewhat of a humorous standpoint, that sometimes those things are meaningful that you might not attribute meaning to, but absolutely having a wonderful washing machine is absolutely a very important and meaningful thing to have, especially when you need clean stuff.
I love it. That is the best answer I've gotten to this question so far since I started asking it. So thank you. That's great. Yeah, sometimes we do find meaning in the mundane, and having had to hook up a few washing machines in my life, I feel your pain there. So
Now, to be clear, it's not difficult to just do the water connections and the plug it in. That's
yeah,
actually very easy. It's all of the other stuff surrounding it that
yeah,
made that challenging. Because I
yeah.
don't want to get any hate mail or hate that it's such an easy thing. It is easy to hook it up, but the getting rid of it and the exchanging, I had to take off the door to the laundry room because it wouldn't fit otherwise. It was a whole, like, one thing absolutely led to another. But
Yeah.
that is really one of those things that I write in the book, the wonder effect, which is that when you pull on these threads of interest that you have, you'd be surprised at how one thing leads to the other that leads to the other. If you didn't make that decision to do it, you would never end up getting to the point where you are. So
Yeah.
it's always important that realizing that decisions are actually the very beginning of complete change.
Excellent. That's great insight. So I'm really excited to talk to you about your book. I downloaded the introduction, which you can get on your website. And when does the book come out? First of all,
May 13th is the release date.
May 13th. Okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So I was curious first to just kind of find out what led you to write the book, because you've had a pretty diverse background, right? You've been a rabbi, you've worked as an educator. I think you do real estate now. So how did your path lead you to writing The Wonder Effect?
So the the path in my life is what gave me the insights to be able to write it.
Hmm.
I But it wasn't that there was something specific about my background that led me to write it. Ultimately, I decided I wanted to, again, coming from the background of like education and learning and like very well steeped in different philosophy. So I came to the point where there was always this part of me that wanted to help give people the insights on how change can happen. And so when I decided that I was going to write a book, the my mindset came around 18 to 25-year-olds. That was originally what it was. It's expanded because it's applicable to both or times in your life where you're younger, but also when you're older. So the in when I was thinking about how to write and what I was going to write, the advice that I got was pick an avatar, someone that you're writing to. They say you can't really write towards the masses, so you have to write to an individual.
Hmm.
And ultimately, the individual that I chose in my mind was my oldest son. And that was simply because he was the one that was going to need it the most within the soonest amount of time. In other words, it's not that I love my oldest son any more than my younger children. It's just he was the one that was going to need it most. So I chose him and I wrote towards him with the mindset of the people that are most important in my life would be my kids, and if they would be asking me advice, what would be the advice that I would be giving to them? What would be the guidance that I would be giving to them for how to look and how to think about choices and decisions in their life? How should they lead forward? And that was what brought me to focus on the book and how to write the book and towards what type of audience to write the book towards. And that's really the point of that part of your life, is that you're making critical decisions. What I would say is that people sometimes, meaning older people, it doesn't matter what age, meaning it could be 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, but at every point that we're at, we're always making a decision. We're either making a decision to continue with what we're doing or we're making a decision to change, but they're both decisions. I just think that when you're a little bit older, you're not realizing that you're still making a decision.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So you talk in the introduction, you talk about wonder, WONDER, which is the word that you use in the title, and wander, WANDER. I'm curious, how are those two concepts related, and how do they work together to help us create a meaningful and purposeful life?
So wondering is basically asking yourself the question, what if? So the significance of that question is that it allows you to open up to possibilities. So what I sometimes find when I'm talking to people and they're asking me for advice is they end up there's an expression in the book. I'm trying to remember who the quote comes from right now. I don't have it in front of me, but basically the idea is that you assume that your field of vision is essentially your limitations. So when somebody's asking me a question on advice, they're assuming that whatever they're aware of is what their entirety of their choices are. So
Mm-hmm.
when you ask yourself, what if, that means that opens you up to the idea of you can ask lots of questions. What if this isn't even relevant? What if there are other possibilities? What if? And so it lets you open up your field of vision, which ends up letting you explore. And that's what leads you to the idea of wander, because wander is to essentially explore, to look for other areas, to be open to different experiences. And so that's the connection that I'm positing with those two words and their similarity.
What made you decide on using the title, The Wonder Effect?
So I feel like there's a lot of, let's call it self-help literature out there.
Yeah.
And one of the frustrations that I've had in reading personal growth or self-help is that I feel like some of it feels too, I'll call it woo-wooey or too out there. And it's just like they're basically telling you if you just believe, then you can achieve, or you say, money's going to just flow to me effortlessly. And
Yeah.
so it feels a little bit, I'm trying to think of a word for it, but it doesn't feel realistic, I think, to some people.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was trying to do with the book is basically provide a rational and philosophical framework that people can understand the significance of the pursuit of growth and what it can actually accomplish. So part of what the idea of the wonder effect is, and why I'm calling it the wonder effect, is because what I'm trying to show is that when you do open up yourself to the possibilities, when you just wonder a little bit more than you have, and you pull that thread, even if you don't achieve X, Y, and Z, or even if you don't become X, Y, and Z, that process will change you in ways that you would not have otherwise expected.
Mm.
And so in that pursuit, even if you're failing, even if you're not succeeding in the way that you had intended, each of those pieces of experience change the present you into a new you. And in that process, you actually gain experience and you gain growth. And that changes you as a person, which ends up changing the possibilities for the future. So the idea of the wonder effect is to allow yourself to pull those threads of wonder, of curiosity and adventure, and explore new ways, new parts of yourself through being open to new experiences.
I really love this idea of seeing life as an adventure and a time of a curiosity and wondering what if. I think that brings a lot of depth to the idea of self-help that maybe we don't get in some of the other literature that's out there. So I appreciate you writing about that. You write in the introduction, you said, this is not a manual that will solve all your problems. Instead, it gives you the tools necessary for exploring your ambitions and embracing discovery, adventure, and personal growth through engaging in wonder. It gives you permission to succeed. Why do you think it is that so many of us feel like we need permission to succeed?
For me, I believe that it's rooted in this need for validation. And it's also rooted in the one of the other concepts in the book about addressing or managing the idea of imposter syndrome.
Mm,
So there is this idea that we have perpetuated in society that you have to be credentialized in order to do. So if you want to be a different person, and when I say be a different person, I mean be in a different experience, be in a different level, be in a different area of work, career, or contribution. So you may ask yourself the question, and I would say it's probably a legitimate question: why me?
hmm
So and I basically would say turn the question around and say, why not you? And therefore what I'm trying to say is that it's a legitimate question. I think that there's no reason that it should be you, and there's no reason more compelling that it shouldn't be you. You can all of the things that might act as your weaknesses can be turned into strengths. So therefore, when I am suggesting that you have to overcome these limitations of validation, I think that basically what a person essentially needs is to be given and afforded the permission to explore that. So when I say permission to succeed, the idea is that what might be holding you back is this need for validation and this sense that you're not enough. And so one of the ideas is that everybody, and this is the one of the ideas that one of the stories that we talk about in the book, which is the idea of people at all levels and stratospheres of society experience imposter syndrome. One of the famous stories in the book is this idea of somebody who is going up to the book when they are receiving the Nobel Prize. One of the traditions is that they have to write their name in the book. So this Nobel Prize winner, when interviewed, he was asked if he ever experienced imposter syndrome, and he said, yes, when I went up to that book, he won the Nobel Prize in physics, and he went up to the book and he saw names like Einstein and etc., and he's like, I'm no Einstein. So the point is that if the person who like objectively is winning the Nobel Prize, you would think should feel deserving of winning it, if he's questioning himself, then it almost would mean that there's no hope that everybody's going to be questioning themselves.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's not so much that you're ever going to get rid of that, but you have to manage that. So if he's experiencing it, you'll certainly experience it. And that means it's endemic, and therefore everyone's experiencing it. And so you just simply have to manage it, and don't let that be what prevents you from moving forward. And so that's why I say that I think that people need this permissibility and this permission to be able to move forward and succeed.
Got it. You talk about an approach called future casting. Tell us what is future casting, and how is that different, if it is different from goal setting?
Sure. So future casting there's a few different ways that I write about it, but the way that I feel like would be helpful in this conversation is the idea of basically projecting out to the future a vision of yourself, of your experiences, of your life. So if you were going to be projecting out, let's call it 3 to 5 years from now, or you could say 10 or 15 years from now, it's really going to be dependent on the person and how significant the difference is going to be between where they find themselves now and where they're thinking about going.
Mm-hmm.
So when you deeply consider what it is that future will look like, and you have almost you basically write it up or envision it in a very detailed way, almost a fictionalized version of yourself. So you've created such a clear vision for that future, and you've considered it, you've worked it through, you've written about it, you've journaled about it, you've basically constructed this fictionalized version of yourself that you would love if that would be your future. So that would be future casting. And
Mm-hmm.
then what you do with that is that you look at the difference between where you are and what that future is that you are envisioning. And that's where the idea of goals would come into play. So the idea of goals would come into play is basically gaming out how you can get from here to that future vision of yourself.
I like that. It reminds me of a book I read not too long ago called "Be Your Future Self Now" by Benjamin Hardy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but
So Benjamin Hardy is a person that I absolutely adore as an author. I've never met him in person,
oh, okay.
but I have read several of his books. I deeply respect him, and I deeply respect his writing. I haven't read that book actually.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, it's a good book. I know Ben not real well, but I know him a little bit. We're members of the same church, so I've gotten to meet him a few times. But yeah, he's a really thoughtful guy. But yeah, it kind of
Oh,
reminds
right.
me of
He does live in Orlando, I think,
he
right?
does. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, he lives.
I think it was referenced somewhere in one of his
Mm-hmm.
books. Yeah.
Yep. Yep, that's right. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, so future casting, I like that idea. Now, one of the things you kind of caution about it in your book is expert groupthink, and we live in a time where we always want to know what the experts think about any given subject, right? And I think there's good reason for that, but you kind of give us a little bit of a caution about expert groupthink. Why is that?
So there was One of the things that I heard from my father, one of the expressions that he would say is that when you say "I know that," you've basically stopped thinking.
Mm,
Okay, so in other words, you're not really listening to what the other person is saying, and when you say "I know that already," you're basically not listening anymore, and you're not willing to learn anymore. So what I feel that the let's call them the experts do for people is they basically will accept what the person is saying because of their position. Now, the question is like if you're trying to think for yourself, the real question you should be asking is how statistically accurate are the experts? That's the question that I would be wondering or asking when I hear about experts.
yeah.
So one of the people that I quote in the book is Philip Tetlock, who did a study, and the study basically tried to determine, I think it was over about a 20-year period of time, and he tried to determine how frequent and accurate is the quality of expert predictions. And ultimately what the study showed is that experts, for the most part, aren't. Again, he basically said that there's an inverse relationship to people that are famous experts and their accuracy. And he basically said that experts in a variety of ways are their accuracy is basically no better than chance.
Mm,
So for me, it's like we end up basically outsourcing our thinking to experts, and their expertise often is no better than chance. So therefore, think for yourself, think and consider it for yourself, and don't stop thinking because somebody has said X, Y, and Z. It's almost a cliche that experts have been wrong in their predictions from the I don't want to say the beginning of time, but I'm saying from the beginning of our modern era
yeah.
of what is possible. So I discount it very highly. Again, I one of the things that I would advocate for is true expertise. And true expertise ends up coming about in a mix of ways, both on your own learning and your own understanding, your own exploration, and your own actions. And in a mix of ways, when you actually learn yourself and you apply that learning and you try that learning and you experiment, that's when you really develop a certain expertise that I would be advocating for.
Yeah, it's both intellectual and experiential. You've got to have
It would be like learning to swim from a book, but never hopping in the water.
yeah. That's a good analogy. Along that same line, what are your thoughts on AI? Because it's becoming so ubiquitous now. I mean, we're using it all, in all sorts of aspects of our lives. And AI, I mean, I kind of think of AI as just an amalgamation of the expert knowledge that we have out there. What are your thoughts on AI and how that affects our ability to wonder?
Oh my God, AI is fantastic, and I think it's an absolute enhancer. I don't again this I feel like is one of the perfect ways of looking at this dynamic. Okay,
Hmm.
what you're having right now is you'll have people that are predicting that AI will be the end of the world, and you'll have people that are predicting the exact opposite. Now, I don't know. Maybe both can be true. I have no idea, but it's an interesting way of thinking about it. That like you have people that are experts in something that's just emerged. That like even the idea that someone's an actual expert in AI is almost ridiculous. In other words,
Yeah.
it hasn't been around long enough that you can have real true experts. You have people that have a lot more experience and a lot more knowledge, and they've used it more, but it's changing by the minute. So or a second, I don't know. but anyway, like one of the interesting things for me is that I wish that AI had been around, had been the way that we're using it now. I'm saying ChatGPT and Perplexity and all the other ones. So I wish it had been around when I was writing the book, because I actually feel like it enabled me to enhance certain parts of it. But I absolutely think that it's a huge enhancer, and it's a way that you can actually fully and deeply ask some of the questions that I advocate in the book. It absolutely enables you to have personal growth in a way that you otherwise wouldn't. And I think that, unfortunately, I feel like some people might be looking at it as a almost like an answer bot, which
Mm.
to some degree you could say it is. And what I mean by that is some people might think, okay, I have a essay question, and write this essay question, which I'm not it's neither here nor there as far as like my opinion on that. But what I do think is that it can actually be helpful for you to think and respond for your own self. So I think that it can. So for example, if here's an example of the way that I would use it. So if let's say you had to write an essay question. So if you said to ChatGPT or any of the other ones, here's an essay question I have to write. Can you ask me 25 questions that if I respond to those 25 questions, I will then have good content for a response to this essay question. And then it'll ask you 25 questions that would be different ways of thinking about it. And when you have those questions, you can then meaningfully put together responses that can be constructed into a response to the essay question, just for example. But it's like that with virtually any other part of your life. I mean, I know people that have used it to help coach themselves. And again, it might not be something that some people might not be able to afford a coach, but they might be able to afford the $20 a month that ChatGPT is as for the paid version. I know they have a free version. I personally think that there's a huge difference between the two.
Yeah, I do too.
But again, same thing. You can use it to help explore lots of topics in your life.
Love it.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's an insightful way of looking at it. Talk about failure for a minute, because
no, let's not go there. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Because inevitably, as we're trying new things in life, we're going to have failure, right? And you talk about how we need to kind of reframe failure. How can failure actually contribute to a meaningful life?
Sure. So I never thought about the analogy this way, but why not? Let's try it. So when you one of the strategies when you are weightlifting is that it says that you're supposed to lift the weights until failure. And what that means is to the point that your muscles really can no longer handle it anymore. And it's at that point that growth happens. Mm-hmm. So the idea about failure, and in my opinion, why I think it's looked at wrong or incorrectly, is I think about failure in two, at least right now in the conversation, I think about it in two ways. One is in the school model. Okay. And in the school model, what it's a frustration that I always had. So, you have your parent teacher conferences, and the teachers inevitably go towards grades. Okay. Now again, for me, I would question what is the point of the grades? So the way that grades are used, especially in the common school system, is basically to tell you pass or fail, or how successful you were or how failing you are, depending on how you want to look at that.
Yeah.
And the way that I would advocate looking at it, and this is why I say that failure is a positive thing, and that's because what it's really doing is helping you understand how much you've grown and how much left you have to grow. So in other words, if for example, let's take vocabulary. Let's say you had 100 words that you were supposed to learn, and let's say you got a 66. Now, or let's say 63, because different school systems have different grading. So if you have a 63, that would be called you failed, right? Yeah. That's what they say. You got a 63 on the test. Now, how do they normally do those tests? Let's say they'll take out of the 100 words, they'll take 25. And based on that, they'll infer how much you learned. Okay. Right. So what I would be saying is that 63 is telling you learned 63% of the words that you need to know. And so if you want to get to the 100%, you have these other 27 words that you have to learn. So it really should be acting as an assessment for them to be able to fill in the gaps of where you missed something and how is it that you missed something and how can we fill in that gap to help you learn that. So one of the things that I say in the Wonder Effect is that failure is basically something we've been doing our entire lives. And failure is basically just a tool or a mechanism to tell us what we need to do differently. So we've been failing since we started walking. We fell down, and that falling down led to us figuring out different ways to do it. And failure is just a part of life, a part of the process of learning. And so the idea of trying to avoid failure, nobody wants the pain. Nobody likes feeling like a failure. Nobody wants any of that. You want to get the 100% on the test. It just, the way the life works is that we have a process of growth, and part of growth is having failure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I like that. And then as we kind of wrap up here, you close the book talking about the importance of service. Why did you choose to do that?
So one of my favorite books that I've read is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, great book.
And essentially he says that your life and what propels you forward is meaning and purpose. That's the essence of a person. So the reason I like, at least from the framework that I'm coming at in that last chapter of the book, is basically to say lots of times people think that once they've succeeded in whatever way they want to have success, that's when they're going to, let's call it, quote unquote, give back. The thing is that what I'm advocating is that people need to realize that it's not something that comes necessarily as an after effect or something that you do once you've succeeded. It's actually, you can look at it as the very driver for your success. So in other words, meaning, purpose, giving back, those are all actually at the core, the soul of why you, at least the way that I would advocate, why you're doing what you are doing, or why you should do what you want to do, because of being able to do X, Y, and Z. It happens to be, I was reading a book recently about it's funny because I feel like these two technology people overlap in certain ways, but I was reading a book about Jeff Bezos and the creation of Amazon. And basically from his youth, he wanted to create a way that people could have interplanetary domiciling or living outside of the world. So at all of the successes for what it is that he tried to create was essentially for this mission. So that was the driver internally for why he wanted to succeed. You see the same thing, I think, with Elon Musk also is in that same thing. Now, whether or not living on Mars or again, not an argument for on behalf of it. I'm not saying I want to live on Mars or that's the solution to our world. I would say maybe there's other ways of looking at solving worldly problems. But the point is that the idea of having a purpose-driven life, that is what's going to be the biggest fuel for you to have personal success, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Well, Adam, this has been a great conversation. Where can people learn more about you, and where can they get the book when it comes out?
Sure. The easiest way is really just to go to my website, which is adamhaston.com, ADAMHASTON.com. And from there, you can get to any of the other connections to be able to buy the book, etc.
Awesome. And we'll put the links to everything in our show notes for our listeners so they can check it out. Congratulations on the book. I'm really excited to read the whole thing and look forward to seeing what you do in the future, and appreciate you coming on the show today.
Sure, of course. Thank you so much. It was great spending time with you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Please remember to check out my website, fulfillingworkmeaningfullife.com, to sign up for my monthly newsletter, Meaningful Insights. When you do, I'll send you a free digital resource that will help you find or create a fulfilling career. Until next time, let's make it a meaningful week.